I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Anatomy of a Movie dissection. Today's dissection is Divergent.
Woohoo!
Representing
Are you gonna, what,
dauntlessness
Dauntless.
Dauntless.
is Phil Svitek.
Just dauntless.
Representing candor,
Ooh.
John Comerford.
Oh, okay.
Representing erudite,
I'll take
Very
it.
nice.
Sarah Stratton. Abnegation, Marissa Serafini in the booth.
Thank you,
That's
Phil.
why she's in the booth.
And Amity, Dimitri Panos, who is
No
in
worries.
Vegas.
He's out in the field growing and, reaping.
Yeah. Here's one of my main missions for this this episode is to kind of... Critics have been hating on this movie, and there's been a few comments on our channel where people still comment about us as we're critics, and we're not.
Yes.
And you know what? To all the actual critics, I am surprised at you guys why you hate on this movie, because you know what? I enjoyed it. There I say it.
Okay.
Boom!
That
I
makes-
rest my
that
case.
makes me
We're
a
done.
little nervous to talk because I became a fan of this book and was very excited to see this movie. And
This isn't going to end well.
it's very hard because I feel like I'm going to be like stepping on myself this show because there's a lot of things about Divergent, the film, that I really liked. How it was made, how it was filmed, acting wise. I have a lot of positive to say. But after I walked out of the movie, I had this seed of thought get planted that I think it should have been a TV show, like a 1-hour drama. And ever since that idea got planted in my mind, it's kind of just like grown and festered. And so a lot of what I see and a lot of, I guess, my criticisms of the movie stem from the fact that I think they could have hit the nail on the head harder, taking a little bit a different route. That's not to say it was a bad movie and I didn't enjoy it. I did. I thought it was very fun, high energy, some wonderful things that we're going to touch on and talk about here today. But there was just this one note that missed the mark that I think could have been captured under a different setting in a different
I
light.
get what you're saying.
Is
I
that
mean,
specifically because you read the book, though?
Yes.
You're talking about something that they
Very
didn't...
much
Okay.
because I read the book.
Okay.
And something that I found in the book that I did
so
not
half
find
of
in the
us,
movie.
half of us read the book, half of us didn't. The
Yes.
males of the team did not,
not read the
because
book.
we don't read. The females of the team did.
Yes.
Oh, because we do read. Because
Yes.
we read. Good people.
Yes. Why
Um,
you're erudite.
I'll
But-
take it.
you know, I mean, I one of the reasons why I see so many critics kind of talking about it, because there's so many dystopian stories and things of that nature. We've got one coming later this year called The Giver, which I think we're looking forward
Everyone's
to.
so
But
excited about.
I don't know. It was what it was. It wasn't trying to be Blade Runner, nor was it trying to be The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Nor was it trying to, if you want to talk about a TV show, it wasn't trying to be The Prisoner.
Hold up. Oh my gosh.
okay.
God.
Based on
This is why we separate the factions. Get out of here.
I mean, no, this is probably what it's going to be, I think, a big debate, particularly amongst like people who did read the books and people who watched the movie. And it's a very hard distinguishing to men because this movie got so much publicity in the public eye and it already had such a following. And for me, the book had an essence that was darker, that was very dystopian, and that had this raw edge to it where it's extremely violent packed. It can be seen as very dark. They talk about themes of like sexuality, all these other layers. And to me, they tried to mold this into a cookie cutter teen film, merging somewhere between like Twilight and The Hunger Games. And it was, to me, it was still
Let's talk about the source
lighthearted.
material. And Marissa, speak up in a moment. But for me, okay, I didn't read the full book, but I read, honestly, it's one of the easiest reads, John. You could read this in like 30 minutes. So I read it for 5 minutes and got to like page 40. Now, this isn't Philip K. Dick writing. Let's be honest. No, honestly, because guess what? It's on par with the level of Harry Potter. So to hear that it's dark, it's not that dark for me.
I mean, this book, I feel like there were some dark elements, but I liked that the movie, their creative choices, they went with the lighter route because you want to keep the kids and the young adult audience engrossed with it as well. And then, yes, I did read the book.
But this is also where I'm going to argue. It's because like there is that idea that I guess teenagers don't want to see anything too gritty, but I just feel like that's not true. I feel like we've seen Hunger Games, we've seen all these things that are in a way lighter, but then people are watching, or like take the Underworld series. Like that is a very
dark.
Very dark and also very teen watched. Like, or adolescents or young adults, and they can handle it. Not to mention with shows like Game of Thrones and whatnot, where you're getting multiple storylines, and like things don't need to be simplified down. Things don't need to always be like happy and light. I think that it would have been such a different perspective on the teen movie to see something a little more aggressive and a little more
Okay, so inevitably we're going to talk about the difference between the book and the movie. So give me right now your general. Let's go into specifics about the source material versus the movie that's not as dark about the movie.
For instance, right off the back, once she gets or chooses to be in Dauntless, they're jumping on the train and you get a death of an actual Dauntless and like initiate right off the bat of jumping to that building.
Because they missed the train, or they just missed the building.
Either way, they miss the building, fall on the ground, and their sister is crying on top of the roof, mourning the loss. And it shows that it's a dangerous game, whether or not you're a transfer or whether you were raised there.
And yours is why not keep that in? Because obviously that raises the stakes. It lets us know the context, and it puts us in a different feeling than just jumping on a roof and rolling on the gravel.
And it's very, in the book, it's very cutthroat. It's put out there that this is very high stakes. I mean, in the movie, they increased the number of people attempting to like, what, the original number is 35. Like and when you're first seeing this, you're seeing the rankings, and it's more or less like 10 of each. And so you're really competing against just this small group of people.
So in the book, there's fewer, there's only 10 people or something?
Well, I believe there's around like 10 transfers and around 10 like
so all those who don't make it end up factionless, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
And it was just, to me, like in the book, it was such a battle, and you got to see all these dirty fights and deaths, and it was kind of pushed aside, and there was tons of people who were doing it, and there wasn't too much danger. Like there was a little bit of danger that you might get punched in the face, but it wasn't put out as forth as you were going to die. And that is a big, drastic difference in my mind.
Yeah, and I agree, because in the book there were a lot of more individual deaths that weren't really talked upon, or a lot of individual violence that weren't talked about. Because also, Sarah, as you mentioned, they cut out the first guy, the first person who died, and then there was also another moment where one of them got stabbed in the eye, because just the violence between them, and that wasn't even shown. But we did see the Al, the character who committed suicide. But so there were more individual deaths throughout.
But even that, they didn't show. The
training that they didn't show. So by the time and I don't mean to jump ahead, but by the time they got to the scenes where they're like just shooting at each other, it didn't seem that, I guess we just desensitized to that, because we didn't really touch upon the individual deaths that could have had a bigger impact.
I think it's interesting that the ladies on the panel here want more deaths and violence. I'm kidding. What it seems to me is, obviously, if you've read the book, that's missing from the movie. I didn't read the book, so it's not missing for me in terms of the movie. I can see how that would make it more interesting for you, and certainly would make it a darker piece, so to speak. But as I took the movie as it came to me, I can absolutely see how that would change things. But I just realized, okay, so they're not going that route. So, and because they didn't go their route to start with, for me it worked, because they never really went there. They showed the stakes, but I agree with you, they weren't as high or as life-threatening as they could have been, certainly in the book. But for me, that kind of worked in terms of this movie, because they never hinted at that, it never went that route. So it wasn't like it was out of context for the way the movie rolled out. But I can see how that would be a little bit disjointing if you'd read the book.
Well, like, I think that the director had a very good, consistent vision.
Yeah.
And I think that is what carries it and makes it a good film. It's just hard when that vision doesn't align. Because I think that what people do when they try to adapt books is, you know, they want to get the essence. That's the main thing. It's because you have to make allowances. You have to say, okay, they can't capture everything. It's not going to be identical. And as a fan, I go in expecting that. I know it's not going to be exactly the same. But the essence that I got out of this book, I guess, was disaligned from the vision the director had. Well, and so it was hard to put myself in grasping
because you already
his
have a
main
concept.
themes.
Yeah, it's hard to.
It was hard to like transfer that over when I left the book with a different notion.
And that's always going to be the way it is with books. But I can speak to that in terms of not reading the book because one of the things, because I never said what I liked. I liked the movie. I think it played well. I think it's better than most people are giving it credit for. Is it missing some things? Yeah. And one of the things I thought it was missing is a sense of raising the stakes or the context, which was a little bit off for me. Because you set up this dystopia, but it really doesn't seem to be that bad. And then they're Dauntless are protecting these people for, 100 years? From what? You never get to see what any external problem is, or they're protecting them from what exactly?
Well, that's actually, I looked it up because that adds to the book's nature of, you know, this world is kind of crumbling.
Yeah.
And the director, that was a conscious choice that he made, being that he wanted, we're talking about Neil Berger, he said that he wanted audience to understand why Tris or Beatrice would want to live here and why she would want to conform to this society. So he wanted to give an initial idea of something that was whole, that the audience then saw with Tris, like as aligned with her vision of it crumbling and falling apart and becoming the dystopia. The problem is we know it's a dystopia.
Yeah.
So there's a disalignment.
Yeah,
so we don't
you set up.
need,
Yeah, exactly.
I knew society was falling apart. I knew there were cracks in this foundation. So it didn't need to seem so happy at the beginning. But he made a conscious choice, and it was a decision that he wanted it to seem put together and something that someone would want to be part of and something that someone would want to find affection. Because the consciousness is that if you're in a dystopian society, why would you want to fit in?
Well, yeah,
and
that's
that he wanted to create a whole picture that someone would want to fit
You don't even
into.
need that, to be honest with you, because I agree. That's a little bit, again, I don't think that coincides very well because you don't need that. Everybody knows at the age 16, whatever it is, there's always this sense of trying to fit in. Where do I fit in? What am I going to be? All that kind of stuff is already there. It doesn't matter if you're in a dystopian society or utopian society. You're always going to have that thing happening.
It's cliques at high school.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you don't need...
When you grow out of them, you're like, oh, it didn't matter which one it was. When you're in high school, you want to be
because you're finding
one.
yourself. You're establishing your identity. So the fact that I disagree with that. I don't know why that decision was made because you didn't need it to set up the whole movie. And maybe I'm sure that obviously hurt some people who had read the book and then now saw the movie because I was going, you know, it's dystopian, except this place is nice, and but there doesn't seem to be any real threat. So why do we really need a Dauntless? Because it's not like they're going to take out each other.
But the factionless were the people.
Yeah, but again, the factionless, they're rummaging around, but they don't really seem to be causing any trouble.
Yeah, I think the point of the factions in this movie, how they portrayed it, was that just to set up the 5 different personalities. And that added to Divergence and Triss's character because she had multiple personalities. And I was like, if you think about it...
Well, she just had, not multiple, she just had faceted personalities.
She had 3 different that she could have been a part of. And, I mean,
like
if you apply it to real world, that's everyone.
Yeah.
And so we're all technically divergent.
Yeah.
And the point of the factions were just to like individualize personalities.
Well, yeah, and it's
I
also
wanted to
control.
You know, I want to talk about the script and all the things in a moment, but in the movie, the big decision was, okay, what is she going to choose?
Yeah.
And if there's one slight flaw for me, again, I enjoyed it way more so than other people, so I'm going to stick up to it. But the one problem I had was I didn't understand why Dauntless. You know, if given a choice, why Dauntless? And it's a very philosophical question but there was never an explanation of why she chose that over, like, hey,
Yeah.
had she like literally cut her hand and spun, and wherever blood lands, that's my place.
The only thing I took from it was that I sensed that she had this. This isn't the right words, but this inner warrior. This sense of she was confined in abnegation, and there was something yearning to be free. And I think what she saw in Dauntless is that the freedom with which they just expressed them, and by that I mean they were so physical,
They were flocking.
physicality, and that sense of wanting to just be relentless with your freedom. And that spoke to her age. That spoke to her in this world. I can't even see myself. And everything's very about something else. And for me, it was that inner identity wanting to seek freedom, and she saw it in Dauntless.
You know, because it's
that
funny.
anywhere close to the book?
Yeah, very much. I was going to
Okay.
say that you're getting a lot to the accuracy of what her thoughts are. What was Phil going to say, and then I'll tell you.
I was
going
going
to
to say, because it seems like everyone that is Divergent is picking Dauntless. I mean, Forrest, you know, he's in line with that.
I mean, what they cover in the book, and this is a challenge of the movie, and I'm sure Marissa can agree with me. Going in, I expected a ton of voiceover. And the reason is the book comes from Patricia's perspective, and the whole point of the society is it's not based on as much what people do, is how people think. And that's what they're trying to control. They're trying to control how people think, which is why they've divided them up into factions. Hence the whole story. And so in the book, you get to hear all her thoughts. And that's one of the reasons that I think this would work so well as a TV show, is because you need them, in my opinion. You need them to give all of her choices verification. And there's a difference between being dauntless and doing, like, fighting people because you want to fight, and being dauntless and fighting people because you're told to, and being dauntless, for Trish's case, often fighting people in her gaining of self-awareness and of standing up for other people. And all of that is covered in the book. All of her thoughts and processes.
Sometimes to hide her divergence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that a lot of that gets lost. And
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because when they started with the VO, I thought, God, it's great. First of all, I'm a big fan of VO when it's done well. Sometimes I hate it because it's overly done and you're seeing what they're talking about, so I hate that. But I haven't really seen a VO from a young woman's perspective. And I go, okay, this could be fun. And then they dropped it, and I went, oh. So I missed it. I don't think it needed it. The movie, for me, told the story without it, but I think it would have been a nice element to have. Phil?
yeah, it's just it's a hard battle to fight.
I enjoyed that it wasn't VO heavy, you know, because that's the easy route to take.
Yeah.
So often, and you know, they showed a lot of things really well for me, and you know, we'll get into the actor specifically, but they portrayed all of these things really well to me. You know, and they really did, and she in particular. Marissa, any thoughts on why Dauntless?
Well, why Dauntless? But I mean, I'll get to that. But
Sure.
I liked the use of the VO, because there is a lot in the book. It is very heavy on like which faction is which and like what sets them apart. And I liked how she quickly at the beginning of it really separated them and had the audience understand like this faction is this and this and this. And I think they used that well too
They needed it for all of us who hadn't read the
intellectual
books.
purposes for us to understand. Why Dauntless? I mean, her character, Abnegation faction, they're known for helping others, and they're very selfless, and in that sense. And I felt like Triss in the book, she wanted to get out and help in different ways, because she was confined. You had to be humble and very easygoing, and she felt Dauntless that you could be powerful and build that self-conscious and self-awareness of yourself. And I think that would appeal to her, because in Abnegation they had to be selfless, and in Dauntless they had to build themselves. So, and even in the movie they showed that Abnegation people, they have this inclination to look at themselves in mirrors, because they're not allowed to be selfish in that way. They can't look at themselves. They have to think of others and not themselves. And Dauntless helped build Triss's character in that way.
So, Phil, I'm just curious. So, since it wasn't really there for you, did you assign a reason, or did you just say, "Oh well, whatever"?
I didn't. At the point, I didn't assign a reason. No. I just kind of went with it, and you know, as it later developed, it just seemed like that's where kind of people went.
I agree, because they didn't really do a good job of showing other divergents. Of course, they weren't in any other factions, so you were just in Dauntless.
I mean, here's the thing. Part of it was we spent so much time, you know, in the early rounds, there was a lot of the VO, and we saw a lot of the factions. And then as soon as we were separated, we really were separated for a good chunk of the movie with just these guys. And not that that was a bad thing, but it just kind of took me off guard initially because I wasn't expecting it. You know, I thought maybe we'd get some interaction with you know,
other
I think that what we have to also acknowledge and remember is that Divergent is just part 1,
right?
And we have this whole trilogy, and like the 2 questions you proposed, you know, there's the formula. There's find oneself, be true to oneself, and then after that, your world expands, and after that, your world expands more. And so we had, like, you raised 2 questions. One, like, what are the Dauntless ever protecting people from?
Right.
And, like, you know, are they holding people in, or are they keeping people out? That battle has not been answered. But we do have 2 more sessions,
I agree.
Which I think that's a huge part.
Which is why in the book, I think that, but as a movie, as a whole, I get that there's 2 more coming. But if I knew from the movie 1 that there is this outside force, and that there is at least there's some sort of history or some sort of not reconciliation, but consequence. I mean, that would have raised the stakes for me like crazy, because I just was looking at this going, why are they training so hard for? Who are they going to fight, themselves?
Not that this would have been the solution.
I don't even know if it's them fighting. I honestly, and I'm a fan of this book, but I knew they were making the movie, so I read the book, watched movie 1. I'll now probably read book 2 and then watch movie 2. I like to, so I'm not ahead of myself. But it's put in preposition that maybe they're not keeping people out, they're keeping them in. In which case, it wouldn't be anyone trying to fight them.
No, that part is I figured that out at some point. I'm going, okay, then there is no outside force. They're just that because they're trying to control everybody. That's what the whole thing's about, control. But they didn't really make that, or at least give you a couple hints at that. Because I just thought that for me that was missing a couple of layers, some depth, because it was like, okay, it's all on surface.
Yeah, I mean the big thing is we see Kate Winslet's character every now and then, and she kind of represented that.
What's her name? Janine, is it?
Her name's
her name,
and she has a much bigger part in the film than in the movie. I mean, in the book.
Yeah.
She's definitely, it's Janine, and she's the erudite, and she's the erudite leader. And I thought that a lot of the scenes that they gave her, were well done. I thought that they are like, how do I say, they. Here's the thing. I thought they were good for the plot as opposed to how they were in the book.
They weren't. Yeah,
like.
They were missing some candor.
Some candor, yeah.
Only because
I think they had enough candor actually with Miles Teller playing Peter.
I think he's talking about the truth part.
The point being, though, what I really want to get to, the point being that let's take a movie like The Matrix, right? Forget the other 2. I know, I'm not comparing about the first trilogy, but in the first one, the way they set it up, Zion and all these different things. You kind of you were painted enough of a picture and understand, and you got the interaction with the main villain. Now here we have the main villain, her, and as much as they interacted, they never went more beyond, or threatened each other in any sort of way.
But there's a difference in perspective.
I understand
There's a different perspective and a difference of vision. In this, they were trying to capture the film from her point of view, from her as this 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, but don't tell me The Matrix wasn't from a first-person perspective either, though.
No, but you got the grandeur of it. There was also a wider scale to The Matrix, I feel. Like, it would narrow in on his vision and on what he understood, but you also got
I'm just saying, for this movie, I'm saying the interactions that her and Kate Winslet had, if there's any flaw in the movie, you could have solved it via their interaction, because they had they had the interaction of like, hey, I forget what it was exactly, but you're gonna do the right thing, right? And it was about basically shooting off her parents and things like that.
Yeah, you're gonna make the right decision or whatever it is. Yeah.
And ultimately, that never came down to it. But when she didn't make that decision, they should have gone into it, whether verbally or physically, of like why this is so important.
Exactly. That was the other thing that was missing for me. And again, I liked the movie, but for depth, I would have wanted more in those interactions. Like you said, they were kind of they were story.
They were plot devices. They weren't character.
Weren't character devices, so it didn't really move the story or add depth or layers or textures to it, because I kept going, you're from Erudite, right? She didn't even make an intelligent argument for why.
She did use the word "no" a lot, as in KNOW. In almost all of her lines, there was the word like
right?
"no" or "knowledge."
Okay.
I wasn't keeping count.
I wasn't either. But I mean, my point was that she's talking to Tris, and she's talking about why divergents are so detrimental or in some way going to be put everybody in peril. But she doesn't even make an intelligent argument for why. And I'm going, you're erudite. And for me, that kind of thing was missing because it could have really been juicy to have those kinds of interchanges between your villain and your lead.
I mean, one can assume perhaps that it's because a Divergent, of course, couldn't understand the mind of an intelligent person. But nonetheless, how many movies have we seen where it just sometimes goes overboard of like even if like just the villain explaining the plot.
Even if it is that, usually you see that person, the villain, let's say, even though I know she's masquerading, she doesn't want people to know she's a villain. But that's what's even better because then you look like it feels like those scenes are sussing each other out. Yeah. And they kind of did it, but not. I mean, you could have really made those scenes pop.
I don't know. Correct. I want you guys to really argue me on this, Marissa and Sarah. But for me. And I want to kind of now start to get into a more formalized discussion of it. The original source material to me is not that deep, and so for what they had to work with and what they took, yes, it might have been dark. I'm not saying it's not darker, but it's not War and Peace. It's not. It's not going to end up on the top 100 classics of all time.
No, I don't think it is. I think that it is a fun read that like it's your imagination, but to me the difference is that dark element, which is why I wanted that. It's that different niche, and so much of this is focused on the way people think, and I think that obviously it's entertaining and it's fun to be self-reflective and to imagine which faction you're going to be in if you have to put yourself in one. Like
I'm pulling string again, because I haven't read the book, but I'm partly basing it off the 40 pages that I've read. Yes, it's darker. There may be some ideas of what this is, this Divergent thing, but it never makes its own conclusion about what it is. For me, at least, that's what I got from the 40 pages I read. But Marissa, I want to go to you. Yeah. Please speak up, defend this. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying for me, that's why the movie is what it is, and it could be enjoyable in the way that it is because the source material isn't for me.
Reading the book, I felt like the book had all these extraneous details about the location that they were at, and read the book. They go so in depth with all the details, whatever room they're going or whatever someone's wearing, their costumes and whatnot, more so than character development. And I feel like the movie had more character development than the book.
So there you go. That's surface all the way. You're talking about what they're wearing and where they are rather than
But
character.
I think that the point of that is in the book that like the difference is in the book, little things make a huge difference to the person. So, for instance, if you look at the transformation of Tris, there's a bigger emphasis put on, for instance, as Marissa said, her costume.
She burns it?
And, no, not even. The fact that there is this change of self and physical transformation is very, very accentuated in the book, where her being in this very humble garb and then getting rid of her jacket and then not wanting to change in front of everyone and her sleeping fully clothed as opposed to everyone, and then she has a more tight shirt, and then she has one that reveals her shoulders, and then she has one that reveals her shoes.
Is this in the book or are you talking about
this is in the book? And it's very pointed out. It's very pointed out, like when she decides to, I guess, shed another layer, or in the beginning she never ever wears any makeup in the book, she puts black eyeliner on. There's a physical transformation, and so much of that is like on the little choices that she's changing herself.
Is that what the tattoos were supposed to represent? Her making?
So they.
I mean, to me, that you can get more symbolic than birds flocking.
Actually, it is more.
So that's one of her greatest fears, too.
It's also actually, though, more than that. In the book, she gets more than one tattoo, first of all. And why they didn't focus on that at all, I'm not sure. But the three birds actually represent her three family members that she left behind. So one's for each person.
And flocking towards the heart.
Yes. And so, like,
that would have been good to know.
Yeah, there was.
I thought they were flying away the other direction.
I thought it represented freedom.
That's what I thought too.
It was the thing is they left it up to everyone's imagination versus her personal choice.
Yeah, but again, that would have been great character stuff to know.
And she also had a pair. She gets a tattoo of the abnegation's hands, their symbol. She has a tattoo of that, which she ends up finding match with For's tattoo, and they have another bond there. That
for me,
left out.
I will agree with the decision not to use it because it would have, in movie form, it would have overpowered when he reveals his tattoo. You know, and the fact that, you know, I don't want to be a Divergent, I want to be all these things. That was very powerful, and so in terms of the tattoo, you just needed, you know, they made it out to be more or less this meaningless thing, and when because everyone's got tattoos in this stupid place,
dauntless.
And when you know, when hers again does it have meaning, does it not? You know, perhaps it might, but it doesn't matter. When he reveals his, it's the ultimate punch of like, wow.
Well, let's face it, somebody who's from abnegation getting a tattoo, that's an act of defiance.
Definitely. And like, it's like, for what it's worth, for what they did and the choices they made, I understand from their vision point.
Sure.
Like, most of the decisions they made, the act impacts, her actions, who died, whatnot, fits the director's vision. So he accomplished his goal, which gives the film a consistency and an enjoyability, which makes me like it. I think that I really don't want to have to say this like I'm only going to say this like
4 or 5 more times.
Yeah.
You're getting kicked off in a few. You're going to your own faction.
It's just like there's so many little details that, you know, are, I guess, climactic moments.
You got to wait. Don't read book 2 until after you've seen the movie.
No, but it's like, I feel like in the books there's so many climactic moments that it's because like you get a chapter, you get a climactic moment. It's very much tailored to being like a 1-hour drama versus when in a film you have to arc, hit climax and go down. You can't go up and down the whole time, which is how the book is structured. Like getting a tattoo is a big moment and it's flown over.
Yeah, but partly you can write it off in the movie as, okay, it's her way of getting to talk to this person who, you know, gave her the original test and, you know, how there's meeting up. You know, that's what you can write it off.
Yeah, but they didn't really do much with that.
Yeah, it becomes, instead of like...
They didn't, like, but it became one of her only friends. You know, one of her. To me, it was like, okay, now finally, she's starting to finally convert some people. This was around the time that Forrest started taking liking to her. She was kind of falling in place, and she was now starting to slightly fit in. So I didn't need to know what they talked about. I just, you know, I knew she was going to get some sort of advice and take it from there.
I guess the thing is, like, what I miss is that it's a build-up. It's a build-up to this huge event of her, you know, taking control and fighting back. And that's where they alter all the action to, is her, like, gaining that ability physically, mentally, and with alliances. That she's going to be able to rationally, you know, make a difference. And that I get, and that makes it work. And it's that one, you know, film climax. The difference is that there are so many more important moments in her day-to-day transformation that are character development, that are, you know, small changes that lead to an overall arc that to me get pushed aside for the rationalization of how this has to happen in order for society to collapse, a war to start, and her to save the day.
Could I, you know, maybe this is part of the problem, but this script was being written right. I mean, you pretty much were coming out, you know, with the scripts right when the books were coming out.
Yeah. I
mean, the script was already finished before the third book, you know, was finished.
Yeah.
And so you had all these, you know, a lot of these actors are talking about, like, as they're reading the script, they don't know how the story ends because there's no third book to read yet. It isn't until 2013 that they can finally get the third book to understand. And so, you know, at that point,
this happens all the time. It's called television.
Yeah.
No, I understand that aspect of it, but television is different in the sense of if you're going to make in this sense, you kind of have to know how the trilogy for your movie is going to fit.
Well, somebody should.
I mean, there should be the idea out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could argue as an actor you don't want to know because then you're playing it real time, so to speak. You don't know what the future's
and you
gonna
could
hold,
just
so.
argue that, like, you have to find the foundation of your character, and if they
somebody
transform,
should
they
know.
transform.
I mean, here's the thing. With yes, you're playing it in real time, but also there's certain aspect. You know how, like, there's a there's something that's revealed, like in Star Wars, the second one or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, Luke, I'm your father. You have to know that piece.
That is misquoted, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm making a point.
No, but okay. To go off at that point, I mean, if you think about it, Harry Potter movies, they were filming that before the 7th book even came out. So like, it happens a lot. And with Hunger Games series, I know we're gonna get flack for comparing it to Hunger Games, but that series was already completed before the first movie came out. So, and I can understand why people might be upset that they don't know where the characters are going, especially when they were filming this, but it happens.
Okay, here's my original point, because we got so off track with the stupid Star Wars misquote, and then oh my god,
you told me I got to be a erudite for the day. I'm embracing my role.
Stupidest decision I ever made.
Well, make the point.
No, the point being that there's certain reveals that could have come up in the 3rd book. Again, none of you have read the 3 books, so that there may be information that these guys don't know about their characters. In this movie, 4 being a Divergent was a big reveal. Right. But he has to know that about his character to obviously play it in a certain way in the earlier scenes, because it's not like he doesn't know that information. Yeah. We just don't know it as an audience. And so, I think partly that, again, that may be reasons why certain things were done in the way they were, and perhaps more or less left a little bit more open than they should have.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's very difficult when I watch these movies, because I know there's going to be a trilogy, and I know that they're going to have to, like for instance, and who cares if we're comparing it? I don't care. But the second Hunger Games, I watched that whole movie, and it really, for me, is a 2.5-hour trailer for the 3rd movie.
You mean the 3rd and the 4th movie?
3rd and 4th movie. Yeah, I just went, what? That's it. But they have to work as a self-contained movie for me, because otherwise I hate watching them, because I want a self-contained movie. It's okay if it's a serial and it leads to other things, but if that's all it does is lead to, and it doesn't have its own identity as a movie and stand alone.
If it doesn't have a theme and a message, then what? And
then it's like it's a waste of time for me.
And so your argument is that this did have that at least.
It at least was self-contained, as opposed to how I felt coming out of the second Hunger Games. Is the second Hunger Games? That's it? What? Are you kidding me? And this one at least felt like a movie. It had beginning, middle, end, and it wasn't just beginning, middle, and guess what? We're gonna end it later.
Yeah.
And I think another thing they did well is they came very prepared for this movie. Like they did a little setup, they did make it its own world, and they brought together, I think, a pretty good cast. I think that there was a couple all-stars in it that for me really carried the film, and I think that there was some fun character development and people who had fun.
I'm surprised, I really applaud the actors, but I mean, it's not. Here's the ironic part: it's not like they got their first choices.
Yeah. I
mean, I could go down the list of just for the leads: Lucas Till, Jack Rayner, Jeremy Irwin, Alex Petir, Brent. I've never even heard half these.
These are all mostly for
4.
Yeah.
For Aaron Urquhart was considered for Andrew Pryor.
And I thought Theo James, to put it out there, did a wonderful job. I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought he was one of the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was so compelling to watch.
He was. And I loved that I didn't know. I was like, what? I didn't know what he was playing. Not that I didn't know what he was playing. He knew he was playing something hidden, but I didn't know what. I couldn't. Yeah. And the way it was rolling out was great.
I also think Jai Courtney, who played Eric, he was a little different than what I envisioned. He had a lot of piercings, blonde.
Oh yeah. He was
the slave master, as I like to call him.
He was a good contrast to Theo, and I think that they played well off of each other and worked very well together. I think that visually casting, they did a good job. Like everyone, you could, because there was so little time kind of spent with each character besides Triss and
you could easily identify.
They were easily identifiable, and they were like doing well with the
roles.
Although
I do have a challenge with 2 of the Dauntless guys. I believe it was not Eric, but Peter. And who was the other guy that looked almost exactly like him? Short, dark hair. Yeah, I was like, who? What?
Will.
Yeah.
Will. And that was interesting because, I mean, Peter got brought on. The actor got brought on because Shailene had worked with him before in Spectacular
Yeah,
Now.
exactly.
And they really just liked him, and they had put him up for the role of Eric.
Right.
Which, I'm so glad that he didn't get that.
What?
So
And he
glad.
definitely played it with a more smart, smart douchebag edge.
Smarmy.
Yeah, he was
Kind of-
he was definitely an annoyance. It was much different than I had read him in the book. I think that they really wanted him to do it, and he gave it his all. It was strange because I could feel the chemistry between him and Shailene, and I know it wasn't supposed to be there, and maybe it was because I am a fan of Spectacular Now, so I was reading too much into their past
Well, she
history.
she kept calling him Sutter on set, which is his
Oops.
character name in
Yeah.
Spectacular Now.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And
Didn't really want to fight him and all that. other
like
stuff.
you could sense that they were kind of friends sometimes, and they were supposed to be bitter enemies. Also,
Yeah.
side note, they never addressed why he was with him at the end.
Yeah, that was very odd.
And that was a big plot hole for me,
Yeah.
like that it got skimmed over.
It's like,
It
what,
is addressed in the
now
book.
you're running away with him?
Yeah, it is
it's-
addressed in the book that it's conditional, that he'll help them if
Yeah.
they sneak him off.
Got
And it's
it.
just completely glanced over in
Yeah,
the
it was-
film,
it's
and
just
all
gone.
of a
It's
sudden
like-
he's just there with them.
Yeah, it's like
Running away.
Okay, so
Very
you have to just
strange.
accept that.
Just
It's
putting
one of
it-
those
yeah.
things where I go, okay, maybe they'll explain that in the
the second one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
But,
going to have to, because people are going to notice.
I agree that those were the less successful parts of the acting were in those moments with those, and I don't know if it was. I can't say it was acting so much as they didn't really give them a lot to play, and it bothered me because I wanted those characters to stand out a little bit more, and they just didn't. And I think that it's probably a little bit responsibility in all parts, writing, directing, and acting.
Yeah, no, I agree, because the book, there is a lot of interaction between Triss and the other initiates in the
Especially
faction.
Christina.
And
Yeah.
yeah, especially Christina and Will, because those were her two best friends that she made in the faction. And I wish they had played that off, because I think having the friend interaction really built her character as well, and they didn't. And it was really just Triss on her own.
Exactly, and the thing that I thought would have been more effective is if they had built that relationship between
Christina?
Christina and Triss a little bit more. Then when we see Triss at the end watching Christina on screen about to kill somebody, that has more impact because your lead
and
is
it's very much in the book.
yeah, and
the
it's
good
not
news
quite
is
there.
that I felt like the actors had obviously read the book and invested in it to the point that they were being affected, and like a lot of it was heavily on, I would say, reaction shots of them.
Yeah.
And they weren't given too many lines, so it had to be carried through, facial expression, eyes, connection. And I thought that they did make that, and I know that you could see that they were trying to put in their character growth, even if it was in the background, even
Right.
if it could only be in visual. At least it was there. And
Yeah.
then you weren't distracted to thinking that they weren't in a reality. They were. It was just put a little bit more in the background. So I think that we have to applaud them that they did do that, and they did their research
Yeah.
and their character development
and
on
it's
their own.
just so challenging because so much of it gets truncated that it just doesn't end up on the screen, and you just hope that there's enough there. And for some there is, and for some there isn't.
Yeah, I mean, pacing was always going to be hard because, think about from a story perspective, all things are juggling. You're juggling a love story, so how the hell do you develop that?
Exactly.
Well, it's got to be developed somewhere in the middle because, because by the end they have
setting
to
up the
do
world. Exactly.
you got to set up training. You got to set up this world. Then after you set up the world, you got to set up the serum thing. And
The war.
the war,
they're carrying a lot.
it's definitely a lot.
And I think that it was overall, the film was paced, it was quick. It didn't feel like, I think it was 2 hours and 20 minutes ish.
Yeah, roughly.
It didn't feel that long. To me, it didn't drag. It
You
was
know,
action packed.
I had this to say, right, about Kate Winslet, and so want to tie it back while we're talking about the actors. I think you could have had a verbal argument, but I think I wanted physicality, just because that's what Trish was trained to do. And clearly someone intelligent can't fight. But the problem, the reason why that was never going to happen was Kate Winslet was at this point 5 months pregnant into the film, and if you notice, she's carrying a lot of briefcases, iPads, technology to hide that baby bump.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Couldn't do a lot of physical
Instead, she
fighting.
just got some knives.
Yeah.
and by the way, that's
The
why.
knives looked wonderful,
They
by
did.
the way. I thought that all the knife work was done really well.
Yeah, and that's why for her scenes, a lot of time, it was more on close-ups and whatnot.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of seeing what was going on.
Contextual. So about the pacing, for me, the only part that dragged was when we first got into Dauntless and we start the training. And I was like, there was too much for me. There was just beg your pardon. It wasn't that there was too much of it. It's just that for me dragged. I think it's because we've seen, how many movies have you seen where there's training going on?
Also, it probably wasn't that important to you because the stakes weren't that high.
No,
but if you had people like dying, then training
the
obviously
context
becomes
of it didn't work.
intense.
I think timing was because here's the thing: if I know Inception didn't work well for you.
No, I liked it, except it was just 20 minutes too long.
I understand. But for me, if I'm to pace out Inception, we had the first little bit, the first kind of heist, if you want to call it. And that happened within the first 10 minutes.
Sure.
We have, we kind of get away. And then I would say 20 minutes into, the 40 minutes, we're learning. But even so, even before that, we're kind of assembling the team. So there's various things moving ahead, whereas this was just strictly... by the time we got to the training, because we got the, deciding of the faction and whatnot, what was it like? I didn't keep a time count, but I would venture to say it's 25 to 30 minutes in, and then we're training from 30 minutes until whenever.
Right.
And that feels like a mini movie in itself.
Yeah, that was weird. And I thought that, not that they could because of the book, but I was thinking if they were able to play with time and space a little bit more, it probably would have served them better. For instance, you could start at her writing there about to make the choice.
Yeah.
That's where you could start the movie and then go back, just because you can mix it all up and then have that because it was by the book formulated.
Are you trying to say that it would work better as a TV show?
No, I mean, sure, I'd watch it as a TV show. I think it'd be fine as a TV show because you could certainly get into it more. Because for all those reasons, you don't have to truncate the storylines, all that kind of stuff.
I kind of have problems with the training scenes. Just me personally, because in the book we get a lot of that, but in the book we get more character development that she really is improving. I mean, with the film, they added more people to make it more of a challenge for her to, increase in rank and go through and really become a part of Dauntless. My thing is with the fightings, like I've been in Taekwondo, I know fighting stance, and their arms crossed in very, very
terrible.
awkward.
It's like, who thought of that?
It threw me
Marissa,
off.
I love you.
And just as a fighting person, I've actually been in sparring matches and stuff, and I'm like, I know how to fight in that way. And then seeing them, it felt so awkward. And I'm like, no way are you going to win a fight like that. And maybe that was their creative choices.
It was just trying to show it's a different world at different times.
Yeah, that they're new and they're new to fighting. They've never done this before, had to protect themselves. But
no, I don't think it was that.
Even just the training, I didn't see the physical change in everything.
I think the problem, so many of these movies try to be different in the way they
create their own fight style.
Yeah, I mean, Batman did this, and they were perhaps a little bit more successful. What was the other movie? I forget, but just everyone wants their own fighting style.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes I was going to say the, what's that Christian Bale movie that's kind of dystopian as well?
The mechanic.
No. Remember, they can't have art.
I don't remember.
Well, anyway, check it out. Look at his IMDb, and that was a case of like they had their own fighting style where it was very scientific, of like everything. Everything has a reaction and how you're able to fight, and the more science you know. But I guess they spent 2 months learning it. Maybe we should have spent more.
I think this one stuck out badly because to me it signified weakness, and it stood out so much to me that I looked it up.
Yeah.
And the fight choreographer did come up with the style of the crossed arms in particular because he did want a new style.
That's why.
And he was a fighter.
Stylize it.
Yeah, and he was a fighter, and he was played off a little bit of George Foreman's like peekaboo style, and he was like looking for this different ways. For me, it registered as to guard your face so much. Not that it's a cowardly thing to do, but it's very much when you're in a vulnerable situation that you bring both arms like that over your face, and that this is supposed to be such an aggressive culture and Dauntless. It didn't make sense. It didn't physically
and visually it just looked but didn't. I don't think it looked good in a way.
It didn't look aggressive.
No, and I'm like, had they explained it or given you just because all I needed was Eric or so and so. If you start to fight like everybody knows how to fight, where you just. They go, that's the old way. Don't subtext of it, and it's the reason why this would be better.
Like going into a fight open and ready.
Yeah, exactly.
It's much more challenging. It's ready. It's going in. And these were very like defensive.
It didn't
pull
look-
back.
Let's go to the expert on
cage.
fighting.
Oh yeah, all right, Taekwondo girl.
Well, I was just gonna say, I was like, the way that they had their arms crossed and hunched over, it physically internalized them. Not wasn't expressive and like outgoing to really take on an opponent. It was like curling back and kind of like you're protecting yourself. And physically, it just looked awkward for all.
It didn't work.
And
It didn't work. It doesn't matter if it's.
Yeah. I appreciated the idea of it, wanting to set it, be
it
stylized.
might be smarter. It might be like the smart way to fight, but this is dauntless.
Right.
This is supposed to be aggressive. This is supposed to be bold, and this is supposed to be strong.
Yeah.
And that fighting style did not.
I would understand the fighting style for her because, ironically, you know, she, especially when she's fighting Peter, Trish's, she was timid, partly because it was her friend. So ironically, the take of, remember, it's the hit him in the throat.
Yeah, exactly.
They finally got that. You know, she was so scared to do it, and she finally did it that it took him off guard, and he really was like.
So that was the shot they used.
Oh yeah,
nice.
The one where he actually got hit in the throat.
Yeah.
There you go. Of course, use that one. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, it's a great idea. I think the execution didn't really work because for me, it just took. I was like, wow, really? I mean, I understood why they did it because they wanted to stylize it, make it look like a whole new way of fighting, all that kind of stuff. But it didn't.
sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's thing. You know, I applaud. You know, we talk about so many different movies, and you know, in terms of production design, we just talked about Grand Budapest Hotel, and there's there's a place to put your eggs, so to speak. And for this movie, you know, just make it normal fighting.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
doesn't need to be grand.
Although the stance didn't work for me in particular, I thought that the hits, the punches, and some of the choreography done like later, especially in Four's fight when he defends her from getting thrown over the edge, I thought that was executed very well. I thought that there were points that felt very realistic, like the knife throwing. Those violent moments worked. I felt like they felt fast. I felt like it was dangerous.
I like them flipping the people. I found that fun, and when they're playing their capture the flag, you know, that wasn't hand-to-hand combat, but that was, I thought, done really well.
And that was a fun adjustment. Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not recall any gun being in the book that stimulates the feeling of a bullet.
No, it's true because they mentioned that they did have a gun per se, but it wasn't the stimuli.
It was like a paintball gun.
It was paintball. And which I think adding
this was way better.
Yeah,
yes, it was.
Adding the feeling made it more realistic, I guess, and so we could see the reaction of the actual pain that they're causing.
And I thought that was a wonderful adjustment.
That was great.
That was a wonderful adjustment. Like when it came on screen, I was like, "Wow, that's a great well, not a great technology, but that's an interesting movie technology."
and it revealed a lot about them. You know, Four in particular, he's obviously just amazing. And then as he shoots his rival, you know, he's like a real, as if it was real bullets. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna either take the bullet out, or despite the bullet in me, I'm just gonna continue on.
And I have to say, I for me, the line worked with her saying, "Why does everybody keep saying?"
One of
You're
the
not going to
funniest
shoot me.
moments-
What is everybody
She
saying?
had two lines that I
Yeah.
think extremely popped. The one
Yeah.
you're talking about, which comes very later in the film, where right before she shoots Peter in the arm
Right.
and attacks.
He's
and
not
she-
going to shoot. You're not going to shoot me.
Why does everyone keep saying that? And then like earlier, she has another one where she's in a hallway and she turns, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to think about the exact wording of it. But
Oh, you better get it right, because God forbid I get a Star Wars quote wrong on not a
Oh
Star
my
Wars
gosh.
movie.
But do you remember what it was?
now I'm
Close-
blanking
just
out.
say close
I'm
to
gonna
it.
have to
Maybe
think about it.
I can't
I'm gonna have
remember.
to think
Do you know
about
who
it.
she was talking to?
I believe she was talking to Four.
Okay.
That's probably.
Anyway,
I'm gonna think of it. Keep going.
Let's talk about the challenges, because I'm interested. Not the challenges, but the tests.
Oh, in the room or the mental
simulation.
test?
Do you
the
want
mental
us
test.
to reveal to you the book differences,
Not yet,
or
not
just
yet.
talk
Let-
about how they did this and how we?
Let's talk
should,
about how
like-
we did this, and then we can talk
Okay.
about the differences. Because for me, you know, after seeing the trailer, I was like, okay, how are they going to pull this off? What is this going to be? And you know what? Right from the get-go, because they didn't really show the first test in the trailer, and that first test blew me away. That was amazing.
Which one?
Because remember, it was
The
the
dog?
it was the food and the dog, and then the child.
Oh, right. Okay.
You know, and the mirrors with her.
The
So
aptitude test.
yeah.
Right. Okay. That blew you away?
Yeah, because you know, it wasn't in the trailer, so I didn't,
You weren't ready for it?
I wasn't ready for it in that sense, and the way she handled it, you know, she's just so scared, and yet she's winning, You know, because most time, I expect, because the typical route would have been, okay, if she is a Divergent, she's going to be good at all of this somehow, some way. And ironically, it's for whatever reason, in some sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but she's so bad at everything that's how she wins. Not the right term, obviously.
Right.
But,
well, she
does it in an unconventional way.
Exactly.
That puts
she
her
thinks
on
differently.
top
She
faster than
realizes this dog. I'm not gonna try to attack the dog. I'm gonna surrender to the dog. And that's why I took it. She centered herself and went into a different mindset, so the dog was no longer a threat.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what she did, but that's where I went with
I think the initial approach was because this was the test that she took before she even knew she was a Divergent, before she knew the meaning of Divergent. So she went in it with a different mentality, and I do applaud the acting because she made the audience believe that she had no idea what was going on, and that helped and set the differences between the other simulations that going down the road. Now that when we get into the later ones, that she knows that she's a Divergent, she goes in with a different mindset.
Help me out. Is this the simulation that happens right after she drinks the Kool-Aid?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Which was a very nice vial thing.
It wasn't it pretty?
It was very pretty. It was blue.
It was nice stylized glass too. It was great.
Yeah.
Beautiful prop.
But I thought it was great too that she, when somebody else is in trouble, she saves them, and I mean, there's so much of that. Yeah. What?
Oh no. Good news is I thought it was visually really fun. The mirrors, the self, the dog, the fear. I think that Marissa pointed out a great point that it felt like she was very shocked to be there and did not know what to do.
Right.
And I thought all of that was very fun. Them switching it up with that little puppy was a nice little moment of humor. I mean, they had so many simulations that it was going to be a challenge. They had to rush through them. They have to do it fast. It has to come with speed, like to keep the audience going. And
I don't think it has to come with speed. I think that's just how, you know what I mean? If in that one, I don't know if you're talking about this one specifically, but even for all of them, when you're in that simulation, you have to be fast. The whole point is you have to get in and get out. In some sort of fashion.
I guess
what I liked about it was that it actually, it kind of progressed. So I thought, when they're going to test her out a second time, and that's when the mom says, hey, now they're going to really test you. You got to, I thought, okay, she has an idea of how the first one went, so we're going to get a similar thing. Clearly not the case. And they, then they added more layers to that sort of simulation. We saw 4s. But that's how you have to deal with it. You have to deal with it in a fast manner. And when he said, like, hey, no one's ever done it that fast, when the reveal happens that 4 is Divergent himself, now I understand why he said that.
I mean, yes, I get that. And the difference is in the book that you're right. In reality, it's going by the speed of thought. In the book, you get to actually read all the thoughts. And so it's like, as a human, you can have 5 thoughts at once. In a book, you're taking up a page to have those, that. So there is that heightened of why she doesn't choose. Like, for instance, the very setup of the dog scenario. You got a knife, and in the movie, they use a piece of meat. In the book, it's a piece of cheese. Don't know why they changed that, but whatever.
Dogs love cheese.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. Whatever. Continue on. It's like...
Good choice.
They spend a full... page and a half going through her
thought
talking
process on
stuff,
which to take,
being like her telling them, I'm not going to choose one. Why do I need to choose one? What is this for? And like going through that versus it is a blip. It's a blip decision and I do get it. It is the speed of thought. It's a visual thing that we're supposed to understand. And you could only accomplish the book with some sort of voiceover or whatnot.
Yeah, and that's tough because that does show a divergent mind, meaning the usual mode would be to do A or B or whatever, and she's going
the
through
one
a different
who doesn't
thought
think of anything.
Exactly.
Because every other person who's been through the test picks one.
Right, and that's why the simulations work the way they work.
Mm-hmm.
But she defies that categorization.
And it's much more broken down. So what we see in the movie is she has these images of herself, and there's a lot of time like her understanding her reflection in the mirror. Then she has a choice, meat and knife. Then there's a dog. Then there's an innocent, whatnot.
Well, here's why it worked
expanded.
For me.
So, continue, Phil.
Well, sorry to cut you off, but for me, it was nice because 4 later on became that for us. You know, he says like, hey, if you're going to pass this test, you got to think like a dauntless. You can't, we're not just jumping off this. You know, you have to, in this one, you have to face your fears and go. And you have to look for little objects. And so we got that explanation for me when we should have in the movie.
Right.
You know, because that and that was a nice reveal because you are wondering, you know, it's a philosophy. You know, you might as well look at it as a philosophy book, like why choose this over that, you know? Well,
and I also think, you know, as much as I think that's very interesting what Sarah's saying in terms of her thought process and how I'm sure that read must have been amazing to be in somebody's head and see those thoughts come, because it makes you go, what would I think, you know? But what I did, the way they did it in the movie, they chose to do it visually, was that, okay, if a dog is snarling that much and about to attack you, most people run or do something to shield themselves from the dog or whatever. And she didn't. She knelt down and kind of, and so that right there showed me, you know, character-wise, she doesn't think like most people.
Yeah.
And she didn't really try to protect herself or do anything about the dog until it went for somebody else. And then she sprang to action because somebody else was in jeopardy. So, I mean, it just showed that she thinks differently than other people.
And it looked really well.
Yeah,
They
and it looked
filmed it
really
really well. I thought that it definitely was visually stimulating.
Yeah.
yeah, and I thought the other, you know, again, it kept building and building upon this. So, you know, the first one we get the fire and the birds, and we go underneath, and then we get the.
I wanted those to be scarier though. They didn't really. I mean, it was like.
Yeah, they weren't that scary, but eventually, you know,
my foot's in mud.
No, but okay. So to go off of that, and now comparing it to the book, in the book we get the individual fear simulations. So she goes through it multiple times.
Right.
The first one, we just get her and the birds flocking and pecking at her, and then
it's very
stops.
aggressive.
Yes, and then it stops, and then we get another day where she's doing another one, and then we get the second fear. So, and in the movie, they put all of her fears all in a matter of a 2-minute simulation.
I don't know about because we got the birds and that, then we got the water later. So we kept building upon that, and then when she's finally having to do the test in front of everybody to prove, then they melded everything together, and how's she going to handle this in her own way, like a Dauntless, and they really did.
One of my favorite points of the simulation was that last one in her challenge, where they move from, you know, which I'm sure we might get into, her fear of intimacy with 4. And then they pop her back into what we think is reality, we think is present moment, and it turns out to be another sector.
Yeah.
I thought that was visually really done and plot really well crafted, because that was a little bit altered from the book, and I think it was an improvement. I think that, but however, I'm sorry, my memory's getting a little lost. She proceeds to shoot her family members in the book. Not true.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
In the book, she does not. She takes her own life.
Well, she kind of does that she at least forces the gun. Does she do that in the book? She takes
yes,
the gun. Okay.
And she does that because she's done it before.
Oh,
in the symbiote in her.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't do that in a movie because it would dilute the two. So yeah.
So you have to kind of make
you
a
have to make
difference.
You have to make a choice on that.
I
mean, for me, it works because I didn't know.
And they secured it with the fact that she was being told to do everything like a Dauntless, and it wasn't her own thoughts, versus like in the film it was more about herself. So because of what Phil said about, you know, her being instructed to do this how they want her to, whether or how she wants, it made sense.
And, you know, again, because of how it was set up, she knew it wasn't real. And I think but when she shot her parents, I think she knew, okay, think like a Dauntless, this is not real.
Exactly, because they set that up, that expectation. Before said.
Let's talk about the good Christian morals here with them not hooking up.
Well,
why
because of the author. So.
And what? So I didn't read this about the author. You tell me about the author.
She's Christian and admitted and out there as Christian, and what I've read is that's. She wanted to make sure that was part of the book.
Marissa, are you going to comment?
But I don't know.
Okay. I'm glad.
I may be wrong.
The book, they just make out a lot, and in the movie, they make out a couple times. But I'm glad they didn't take it there, because I felt.
Didn't take what? Them having sex, or them making out more?
But in the book, they do touch upon Trissa. That is another fear that adds to her fear later, because in the beginning
fear of
of the
intimacy?
fear the fear of liking someone and having someone like her back.
Wow, okay.
And to take it to that level, and I felt that they could have crossed those boundaries. If they did go there, it would make it a PG-13 movie. And then, I mean, actually, I think this movie is actually PG-13.
Ooh,
but
God forbid.
but I'm glad they didn't.
Chomping.
That wasn't as big.
I don't understand what she's talking about.
Well,
I think it's just I just think it goes back to the original vision that they hit this film with it being a teen-friendly movie, or
But in the book,
Niceties.
that was part of the thing.
No,
She
but
was
in the
scared
book-
of the intimacy.
In the book, it is, as Marissa said, it's put throughout the novel that there's continuous physical attraction between multiple characters throughout the book. It is made like they make out a lot. On top of that, like for instance in the simulation.
But making out is not necessarily intimacy.
No,
se.
but okay, for instance in the simulation, which in the movie they framed as for being really aggressive to the point
that was
fear.
almost rape.
Hold on, exactly. In which she fights him off. It is different. In the book, she has a fear of intimacy. He starts kissing her, and to overcome that fear, she starts kissing him more aggressively. It's not positioned as a rape scenario. It's positioned as her owning up to her sexuality. It's that is a totally different viewpoint.
Yeah, and then I'm confused as to the author's standpoint on this. If she's because if in terms of setting a message, I thought it was so different. And do I necessarily agree with it? Maybe, maybe not. But it's something I've never seen before. Of they're setting this up for teens, and the fact of like, let's wait. I've never seen that. It's always
Twilight.
They wait.
Also a Summit film.
Clearly,
put
I've seen
throughout
that
the
one.
entire thing. So
That's what the
Summit,
whole
who
book
did this
is.
film,
We can't
Summit,
get together, but I love you. No, we can't get together.
You're
but I love
familiar
you.
with Twilight?
Just enough to know that. I mean, that's the story.
I'm familiar. I can tell you. Basically, it's the girl pushing that she wants to have sex the whole time, and the guy's like, no, marriage, and he's putting it off for almost the entire movie. So and then this one, she does the almost rape fight off, totally different than the book, which is much more about owning your sexuality, and that's to me very interesting, and part of the reason that this could have been a different audience if you had more of the deaths, if you had more of, I guess, that perspective, growing into oneself, accepting who you are, and these are the things you want, versus this, which is friendly. That's why I think that the essence of this film is different than the book. Not based on
she just wanted to hook up. That's what it was.
I just think that Four and Tris should be together forever.
And they can be. We still have 2 more movies to make that happen. But you know what? For the first, which is self-contained, I don't think it's a bad message.
I like the choice just because it was different from what I would normally see. I mean, I didn't see Twilight. I didn't read it, so I don't know about it. But it was interesting that. For me, it worked because it seemed to be character-driven. Somebody who is abnegation, who is trying to rid themselves of that kind of thing, would have a much more challenging time to own that, to participate. So I thought it worked in terms of character, and it wasn't just because they wanted to stay PG.
Yeah.
I had problems with it because we see her problems accepting the intimacy, but then at the end of the movie, when she's trying to save Four from killing herself, she says, "I love you." And I'm like, really? Because she in the book, she's questioning if she actually gets to the point if she loves Four, and then in the movie,
but can you not love someone without intimacy?
I know that was my point.
But in the movie, she says it out loud twice just to save.
I agree
life,
that in the movie they didn't really
feel like that fit.
They didn't connect the dots in terms of us really knowing that she's in love with him. They kind of.
It's in a movie. They look at each other. It's love.
Yeah, no,
That's
exactly.
the formula of movie love.
They didn't really show us that them falling in love together. So I agree that they didn't make that connection so well. But I also agree with Phil. You don't have to have the intimacy, you don't have to have sex with them in order to fall in love with them.
You don't have to have carnal knowledge.
This is where my hand's at. It's like right now, I think that there's 4. Marissa, you can probably speak to this as well. Big teen heroines of now. Whether you want to label them all as heroines is your own decision. You've got Katniss. You've got now Tris. You've got Bella Swan's in the category. Whatever you want. Yeah, I know.
Is that Twilight?
Twilight.
Okay.
And you've got Hermione Granger from Harry Potter.
Yes.
Those are your main teen ones. Of them, I don't think any of them really. Actually, Bella Swan, if anyone, is the most sexually aggressive. Am I wrong?
No,
Marissa?
I agree.
So what's your argument?
Agree.
I mean,
she's
you're
pointing
saying
out that
I'm pointing out that you guys are saying that it's a different choice.
and
the girls out there, and I'm saying
she's
that
letting
for
us know it's not.
For a teen, it's not uncommon.
Yeah. But
it was
it
more
is to us 'cause
uncommon
we're not.
for her to own her sexuality and to
But tell
show
me,
that she liked him. I'm
okay,
not
there
saying
was
that
no
they should be
specific case with
sleeping
Hermione
together.
Granger and Ron where they like pounce on each other like wild animals.
No, there's not. What are you? What is your? I'm
I don't understand your
She's saying
argument.
it did in Harry Potter. They never set the context for that to actually happen.
Yeah.
So there was never. It's not comparing the same things. Whereas this one, they actually put them in the bed together, the whole thing, and so. But I agree with her though. We don't know that context because we hadn't seen those movies, but which is why it worked for us in terms of it being a different choice. Because normally in that kind of movie, regardless of how old they were, they'd be in bed together.
Yeah. I'm used to Indiana Jones, but James Bond
exactly.
movies,
Yeah.
the makeout, the bed shot.
would be
done,
Wait, on
out.
all of those, your main characters are over the age of like 30.
Which is the point I just made. Regardless of what age they are, they'd be in bed together.
Yeah.
So I get why they made the choice, but I still go back to it. I don't care how old they are, or whether or not they did it in other movies or not. For me, it worked in this movie because it works for for somebody who comes from abnegation. I agree with you though. At some point, I hope they get to that where she's arced so much that she does own that part of her power.
I would agree.
But I didn't need it in this particular installment because for me it wasn't.
It wasn't set up in their vision.
Yeah.
But the context they became from the beginning, this followed suit, and the vision is different.
Right.
There you go.
All right.
Sorry if I'm being argumentative.
You're very
erudite.
I'm being very argumentative today. I'm sorry.
I don't know if that's a faction, but it should be. Let's talk about more
erudite and dauntless mix.
Let's talk about the more of the production aspect of things. It takes place in Chicago. The story does. Wait, so you're already not. I can't even get a sentence out without Sarah already interjecting.
That's right. You can't read a book.
Are you gonna fight me on the fact that it takes place in Chicago?
Well, we're talking about the movie though. It did actually say Chicago. Okay, so I don't know.
Yeah,
so
and
we're talking about the movie, not
they
the book.
actually did film a good chunk of the movie, if not most. Well, not the whole movie, but like actual places in Chicago, and they used the cinema space studio in Chicago, which is actually funny because I applied to that place before I even came to LA. So and then they used that production place for the movie. And I've been in Chicago so many times. I did recognize like some of the streets that they were on, like Wacker, like big metropolis streets throughout Chicago. So, and I did recognize that. I loved how they did show Chicago in a different light. Overall, visually, I thought this movie was very eye-grabbing and it was very well done. Like it sucked me in, and visually, it was appealing compared to if you go to Hunger Games, another dystopian kind of franchise. That movie's very dark, very gritty, very muddy, and even the color choices that they used in that, you can tell it was a rough environment. And this one, it was very bright and luminous, even though it was run down. And even the buildings, we see the outsides of the skyscrapers and stuff, they're all kind of crumbling. But when you go inside different buildings and stuff, it's so extravagant, and I found those contradictions were interesting to see, and their creative choices in that.
I didn't have that experience. I didn't notice the extravagance. I must have missed it.
I thought that it was, I felt like that there was a little bit of a brightness to it. To me, it was through the use of light, and whether it was like moonlight and like visually the difference between like, because overwhelmingly the color I got was a lot of like gray. There was a lot of stone, but a lot of it was reflected through shadow.
We were in black because
dauntless, because it's mostly dark and black, and so I get the gray part of that. Yeah.
To me, visually, what was stunning was their use of like how they would sometimes use height, how they use like speed through height, like going off the buildings, the Ferris wheel.
Oh yeah,
like all of that, or like jumping off the buildings into the hole, like the speed, the train jumping off, all of that. Really capturing height and quickness, I thought was very, very well done. Like with the zip line through all of the buildings, through the city, through the capture the flag scene on the different roofs and the Ferris wheel. I thought that was all visually displayed very well.
So why were you laughing at the Chicago line then?
I just was.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't remember. I had something to say and I don't remember what it was.
So, but do you get back to that point? Did you want to speak further about the Chicago thing?
No, I thought it was really done well. Obviously, it's a mixture of real and CGI. I mean, the opening shot.
Yeah, the fence.
There's the
and
fence.
Yeah.
It felt like Jurassic Park in a way.
Yeah.
It totally was like the Jurassic Park fence.
But so we're contained in this, and there was parts of it that were good, and parts of for me, when she's climbing the roof, to your point, Sarah, about the heights, they connected the dots really well in terms of how she was always going to be Divergent.
Mm-hmm.
When she's climbing on top of the roof right off the bat, she's capable.
I liked the way it started with the fence and everything, but as soon as I saw that fence, I kind of said the same thing about Jurassic Park. I'm going, it's dystopian. We're back to the dinosaur time. What because what are they keeping out with that fence?
I mean, it can't be. It's not thin enough or whatever you want to say to contain humans.
Right.
So yeah,
it's very strange. But anyway,
it's a mystery,
and maybe we'll find out.
Have to watch more. Or read more.
Yeah.
And so
I did like the way the production design and the costuming of all of the factions. I thought that was terrific because it's obviously easily identifiable. But just when they were all laid out and it just looked like high school, here are the nerds, here are the jocks. You know what I mean? I thought that part was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Continue.
Go ahead.
I would say I think that in essence the costume designer coming up with 100 costumes and one color palette for each thing. They did a very nice job and trying to make.
And even the
even
the living conditions.
Yeah,
I found
the Spartanness of the abnegation.
Yeah, if you like that, you're gonna love the toilet.
Yeah, yeah.
So I found that fun. So that it definitely had at least some humor throughout. So I liked it, and they had the great moment when she visited her brother and her kind of family. So as much as we were in Dauntless for quite a while, we got out of it at times, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I don't. For me. Just because the way the world was set up visually, I wanted to see those places a little bit more. Erudite, Candor. I wanted to see, I know we couldn't spend time there because we had to do so much in Dauntless.
But that's why the zip line worked to me because it would have been the world's cheesiest thing to literally draw out a map as she's going down it. But you kind of got. I imagine it wasn't just Dauntless that she was overlooking the entire city and all factions.
Yeah,
I think the production design on this must have been really fun, especially because the book is so detail oriented, and I think that they did focus on that, especially on living arrangements and wardrobe. And I mean, as you said, it'll be fun to eventually explore all the other places. Because they developed a curiosity about it, which was
they built enough of a world where I went, I want to know what the other places look like.
Yes.
But not too much where I was overwhelmed, and it didn't interrupt the story for sure. I mean, because we were in Dauntless for so long, but I really was intrigued by the rest of it. So I thought for that it was very successful.
Well, kind of a cool aspect of it. Most of the weapons were obviously CGI, in terms of their actual gunshots, but the futuristic-looking revolver seen during Trish's hallucination is a real firearm.
The one he shoots his. Who's he shoot? Oh, the innocent. He shoots the innocent.
Yeah, where he says, I can't look at her.
Yeah.
Should we dive a little bit into that, Marissa?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, go for it.
So for his vision, I think that the stimulations were really great, and they used it as a good plot device for making the innocent kind of morph into Triss. I think as we watched her was very visually interesting and tied in as a parallel to the final scene. Also with the fact that just him looking away and that being his one fault, but always being able to shoot the person when they walked away, and then she grabs his face at the end. I thought that was a beautiful.
In fact, I would say that they used those simulations better in terms of his arc than they used for her.
I agree. And I think
I mean, I don't know if you're talking about technique-wise, but again,
story-wise,
I'm talking about parallels, bringing in connections.
Yeah.
Story-wise, I think by having such a strong one for him, it made her. It explained hers. I don't know.
Yeah, but here's what didn't work for me: is they used the birds, the fire, and the mud in her first simulation, not the one where she's drinking the potion, but the one where she gets injected. And then it was the same. So I didn't really get to see her 4 deepest fears, where his. I got to.
Well, what isn't explained as well in the film as it is in the book is that 4 is called 4 because he only has 4 fears, and it's remarkable. Everyone else has not a zillion, but normally
10 to 15.
10 to 15. So his is way lower than average, right? Which is why everyone calls him 4. They did a change that I think very much worked well for the film, where 4's fears change. The first one is height. That remains constant. The second one is confined spaces, which also pretty much remains constant. The third one is that we have a backstory of this child who used to be in abnegation that was pulled away from his father as a leader because his father was abusive, and he had lost his mother in childbirth. This ties into Four's identity because his third fear is that he has to shoot a woman who we are led to believe is his mother.
Oh, interesting.
And then the fourth is the big reveal of Marcus. So these are all supposed to be connected to his upbringing and why he actually left abnegation.
Yeah, exactly.
And it wasn't just based on him being divergent, and divergents are automatically in
wanted to
Dauntless.
get out of there.
It was because he really did feel a connection to abnegation. He just had to, for his own safety, get away from his father, and Dauntless was the only other
why
option.
I wanted more out of those simulations for her.
Yes. So this was all established. I think that the changes they made really did create great parallels in the film, and it was a good filming decision. But that's just kind of an insight into, you know, some things that they did have to adjust.
Yeah.
And there are minor adjustments I'm okay with. I don't think they needed all of Four's story because they built up his circumstances enough that he was a grounded character.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the way they handled Four. I mean, since I haven't read the book, I thought his story and his arc was way better.
Yeah.
And stronger and clearer.
She's got 2 more movies to arc.
That's true. But again, she's still your lead. She still has to arc in this movie.
I don't know. For me, because she's unlike even, you know, where Katniss in Hunger Games is so timid. Shailene's character just takes it to a whole nother level.
What, timidity? Or
yes,
Okay.
Trish.
Trish.
And so, you know, by the end, to me, she is strong.
I'm confused. She takes timidity to a whole new level, or
No.
takes what to a whole new
She
level?
starts where Katniss
Yeah.
in Hunger Games is, you know, she's like, let's say she used to be the benchmark for timidness.
Okay.
And overcoming timidness. Where Trish starts and how timid she is and yet is able to get through to where she ends up is huge to me.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm
I know
like,
you're a Hunger
like,
Games
hi,
person in
hi,
there,
Marissa.
Okay. I'm gonna
Please.
I'm gonna speak on that.
Thank you.
I
She
think
loves Jennifer Lawrence.
Okay. I think Katniss Everdeen, her character already started off strong. She wasn't really timid. She was a strong person, and she gets stronger throughout. I feel with Triss in this movie, she starts timid. You know, she grows a bit, but I think maybe it's just the acting of Shailene Woodley. She's a great actor. I didn't see her really becoming a strong person. Because every time you see her in reactionary shots, even through like every simulation, in the beginning, middle, end of the movie, she still looks the same. She's still
but
like
here's
questioning
what I would
everything.
argue with you
She's
guys.
still timid.
You haven't let me make my point. You've listened to Marissa. I'm adding.
Yes,
Go
please
ahead.
do,
Please, Sarah,
go.
jump on.
Okay. Also, if you're bringing up Katniss starts as a very independent woman who's fighting off her family and being very brave.
Yes.
Her biggest struggle is accepting the role of responsibility of being the heroine of a nation. That's where she is. She is so independent that her battle is becoming that figurehead and having like those pressures and living up to expectations and kind of in a way being the representative of the people. That's her hardest section. Then you have Triss. Triss starts as a girl who wants to be brave, who doesn't know where to fit in, and her whole thing is supposed to be realizing who she is, and then on top of that, learning that the best thing about herself is when she cares for other people, taking action for them. It's not taking action for the base of action. It's not fighting just to fight. It's that she understands that her greatest strength is that she wants to fight for other people.
And there's a sense that it's not about the isolation of your faction. It's about the integration of all your facets. I mean, I think that's good. Anyway.
And yeah, it's accepting
Yeah,
who you are and like
exactly.
understanding that she is equal. Like she has this huge mental struggle between not belonging where she was born in abnegation and wanting to fit into Dauntless. And she comes to the understanding that the reason she doesn't fit in either is because she is divergent and therefore all of these factors are affecting her. So to me, it's not as much about who's more timid. It's about the challenges, the greater challenges they face, which is for Triss as accepting of oneself and understanding that she is not categorized, but in fact the divergent she was labeled at and feared at the beginning. And for Katniss, it's being the representative of a nation and leading people forward.
Well, I can't speak to it because I didn't see the first
I
one or read the
can't,
book.
so-
What I can say is, for me, I think this just does have an arc. For me, it was clear and clear enough anyway, and I thought it was a good arc, and it worked for the movie.
The only point I want to talk about, and Marissa, I understand that she may have a timid face or however you described it throughout, but nonetheless, she's able to carry out what she needs to do, and she does it better as she goes out throughout the movie. So, I
actually thought that worked for her because Shailene just has a face that looks, and sometimes she just looks so doe-eyed and 14.
She just seems like such a kind person.
Absolutely, and then at other times she looks like she's 20 or something, and she looks much more mature.
Which is why line, we joked about it, like, why does everyone think I'm not going to shoot?
Yeah,
was
exactly.
ultimately that much more funnier because it's like,
Yeah.
you're not only speaking to the characters, but you're speaking to the audience of like, I am capable.
I can handle this.
Yeah.
But I admit I was one of those people. I was like, she's not gonna do it. She's such a small, and I think it's the physicality of Shailene Woodley. She looks so young. She has that baby face, and then when you put her in a position where she's supposed to be that leadership role, she doesn't have the physicality to execute that.
You know what, Marissa, you're a great leader, and no offense, you don't quite have the physicality either, but you know what? That just goes to prove you don't need physicality to be a leader. Real quick, funny note, I want to talk about Shailene specifically because she's got so much coming out this year. Jesus.
Wow.
Well, The Fault in Our Stars is coming out in about the summertime, and that's going to be a big, big movie in some sense. And actually, Caleb, the actor who plays her brother, that's her love interest in that movie, so I find that interesting.
Very incestuous.
Very incestuous. I mean, she's, she brought in Miles Teller to this, who I found hilarious because I know him from Project X and 21 and Over and movies like that, and Spectacular Now, of course. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
I want to point out, since we're talking about
anything
the
you want to
youngness,
argue about more?
I just want to point out that I think it's very funny that Shailene Woodley and Margot Robbie are like a year apart in age. Just side funny note, because they're, I think, two big female faces of the year.
What?
So Shailene obviously has Divergent as well as Spectacular Now and other things. Margot Robbie would be your beautiful face from Wolf of Wall Street.
Well, two completely different movies.
Two completely different mirrors, but both very public eye females right now in the industry.
For
Only
two
a year
very
apart?
They're a year apart.
If you think about it, also
not have guessed
Shailene Woodley and Jennifer Lawrence, they're only a year apart.
Yeah. So
yeah, but here's the
all,
thing. I would compare Jennifer to Shailene more because in Wolf of Wall Street, there's attention on her character because of different reasons, if you know what I mean.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, when you look at Hollywood and like who's getting attention in Hollywood, there's typically like a group of, female faces. And right now it's been Jennifer Lawrence for a while and she's keeping strong, and I'm a Jennifer fan, so that's great. Shailene is like the new it. Like there's a bunch of people are saying like, is she the new Jennifer Lawrence, whatnot. And then Margot Robbie had a huge star rise this year as well as Lupita. And I feel like it's good to like acknowledge like who's getting the attention in Hollywood and where they all stand. And to me, it's just very funny that they can be looked at in such different ways when they are.
Duly noted.
In
to me, it must be funny for Shailene and Jennifer of like, oh, Shailene must be the new Jennifer. Like, okay, why can't I be just
here?
Why can't I just be Shailene?
Yeah.
And B, like for Jennifer, like, what the hell?
I've been here 2 years. What do you mean the new one?
People like to create controversy, and like the thing is,
and there's so much controversy. Okay, speaking of that, in a post-Hunger Games world, like most of this crap that is coming out about this Divergent movie is like, can we live with a Divergent in post-Hunger Games world? And they're different movies, people. They just are.
And Shailene and Jennifer are supposedly friends.
Yeah,
just setting.
But I get the controversy because there's so many similarities, and young women, all that kind of stuff. They kind of look the same. All that kind.
There can be similarities. Doesn't have to be controversy.
I know. I don't know what the controversy is either. They're different. They can stand. They have their own audiences. They even have a crossover audience. They can stand on their own. I don't know why there has to be this huge controversy about them.
Yeah. And it's not like Jennifer Lawrence has the time to all of a sudden do Divergent as well.
And also there would be a huge, like, I'm a Jennifer Lawrence fan. I would be like, You can't put Jennifer Lawrence
No.
also in Divergent.
She would run
you
away.
Need someone new.
Yeah, and why would she want to do the same thing or something similar? She wants to expand her CV, for crying out loud.
Anyway,
Can we actually talk about the chemistry of Theo James and Shailene Woodley? Because in the book, yes, there is a big age difference, but you could really, really tell in the movie, because in real life they are 7 years apart. And again, I have to go back to the physicality.
such a big difference in age, by the way. Huge.
Shailene looks
when
like
you're supposed to be
a
16.
teenager.
Yeah.
Theo James, he's very built, very gorgeous looking, and he's the adult. And just seeing them together, I felt, maybe physically, it felt forced, because there is the big difference between them, and I couldn't feel it.
I didn't mind that, because you know what? I think he's attracted to her because she's doing things in a different way that perhaps when he came into this he was scared. Now he's got this should be a quality when seeking out your mate, but you know what, just they're both divergent, so hey, they can kind of see eye to eye and have good pillow talk.
Yeah, and I where I think it worked is that they're let's face it, how many students have some sort of wish fulfillment with their teachers? I mean, that's kind of an older man and all that kind of stuff. Whether it be older man or older woman doesn't matter. But
where are you going with this?
No, I'm just saying it works. I mean, I didn't feel like it was forced because it took a while to get there, and in some ways that was a bad thing because it doesn't have enough time for it to progress to the point of I love you. But you don't have the time to do that in this kind of movie.
Yeah, Sarah.
What?
All right, we're gonna end on that. Thanks, Sarah. Just gave me a look.
We asked you to comment on the chemistry between Theo and Tris. I mean, Four and Tris.
I don't know. I guess I didn't comment because I'm not really sure. I think that there were moments where I definitely felt what Marissa was feeling, that it was a little forced. On top of that, I think that I don't know, and it wasn't on the actors. I think that overall, I was just getting a sense of chemistry that it was more of a guardianship than like a falling in love.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think they made the case. They didn't show the falling in love.
And so that's, to me, it wasn't that it was a bad relationship or that the relationship didn't have chemistry. Like, it was there, and you could feel the actors like connected to each other. That I felt. I just felt that it was more of it was an adoration or a taking care of or guidance, rather than in the book it's very much they fall for each other and they fall for who each other is and who.
I think, to me, what justifies their love is again that scene with the tattoo when he reveals everything, because it's for her finally, where she's been so guarded perhaps of this, and now she can be truthful. Her mother says, you don't trust anybody. And now she's found someone she can be finally truthful with, who she's liked, or at least had an infatuation with all along, and who has protected for her. And, he's kind of known all along that perhaps she may be a divergent. So it works for me in that way.
And my thing, I understand that. And my thing with the actual meaning of divergence, I don't feel like they kind of built it up, but the book explains it a bit better. But in the movie, they explained that it's a really rare thing. You never see it. But then yet we see like 5 different divergents, and I'm like, how rare is it? If we keep seeing, okay, so we see Four and Tris, they're both divergents. In the book, we find out that Tris's mother was also divergent. And in the movie, we get
that the tattoo artist's brother.
The tattoo's brother was divergent. And then when they were doing the last simulation, when they're all zombie drones, that we get that the random 1 or 2 guys that were, or 3 people that were divergent. So we saw divergence all over the place, even though they established the fact that it's very rare.
The problem is rare is... rare means different things to different people.
They could have been just telling everybody it's rare because they don't want anybody to know about it, which is interesting.
And it could prove to have its own society.
Great, absolutely, and that makes for a much more layered thing. Or it could be that there are many out there that are in hiding, so we don't know. But either way, I think they missed the boat on that, because I think they did a poor job of telling me what the hell Divergent. First of all, what exactly is it? You have facets of all of them. They didn't really. And it would have been better if they had taken a little bit of time with that, because that's what the movie's called. And they didn't really explain in a good way, in a concise way, a compelling way, why the hell it's going to be the house, the card that you pull out, and the whole thing's gonna crumble.
Yeah,
The whole thing hinges on that, and I go, are you gonna ever explain why that's gonna pull this thing down?
I don't know. Here's the problem with dystopian movies are so tough, and so many times, like, you get the news reports sometimes at the beginning of, like, in the old days, it caused World War III.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, well, you know what? Rather than go that route and be cheesy, let's just kind of put it in exposition, don't show in this case, and it might actually work out better.
You have erudite, right? That's what they're called. And they can't make an eloquent argument about why this is a bad thing.
Maybe they're not as smart as we think.
Well, that's my point. Is like, well, come on. How do you not? You've had 100 years to figure this out.
But, okay, not to spoil the giver. Maybe it's like because after 100 years of everything, we've forgotten what we're really fighting about. So it's this is just the way it is.
That's great. That would be fine. Then it's about everybody coming to awareness. But
we'll
in the absence of that, it just looks like, well, you totally missed the boat here.
I think we'll get there.
I can have a good thing that I liked that we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, why don't we end the show on that note? Let's go. Tell us.
It's a minor plot, but I thought that the adjustments they made to her interactions with her parents towards the end of the film, when they brought back her abnegation parents, her mom, who's played by Ashley Judd. I thought Ashley Judd's like fight sequence, the visual of, like, I believe it was Tris and her mom was on, like, pushing to him. They both had their guns and both fighting. I thought that was very fun and compelling. And then how they had her father step in to the line of fire and really embrace that this was his daughter's action role and he's going to help whoever can. I thought that they made their characters very strong with very limited time. And I thought that was done really well, and it gave Tris a lot of support and something her character could definitely lean on and reference. And it was
I also thought it was great character stuff, because in the beginning she makes a choice to basically leave her family because by choosing Dauntless, like, that's it, and I'm faction over family, all that kind of stuff. And by the end she's trying to save them, and in the act of saving them she loses them, which I think was great character stuff.
And I think that they had very limited amount of time on the screen, and I think that
they
felt very limited on the actions of her parents. It was I thought that was done really well.
The last part I want to talk about is the music. Simply because, we kind of talk about it sometimes, the music, it's just kind of...
And Summit has a background of putting in very popular soundtracks.
Yeah, there's some popular songs. Marissa, feel free to pull up any one of them.
Check out here. You guys go ahead.
I mean, here's the thing. It felt very CW, but that's not a bad thing, especially with it being the audience you're going for. So I didn't mind it.
What CW? I mean, you mean country western? What do you mean? CW?
The network.
No, CW, the network on TV.
Okay, I see the music.
CW TV.
Well, no, I know, but you said music and CW. And when the movie's they're going for a country western audience. What is he talking?
Hey, the country audience is big. Marissa's a country fan. No, but obviously it had those moments and things like that. For me, was I the biggest fan of him? Not necessarily, but it didn't, I understood it and I could look past it and I didn't mind it.
This is one of the trends in this genre of movie that I do really enjoy, is that they really bring in, not popular music, but like indie songs of bands. And they create these soundtracks that you can listen to, and they're good on their own, and they're not scores. They're plot-driven soundtracks. And I think that they are fun to listen to and fun to buy, and I think that it's something that the audience really enjoys, and I've enjoyed it throughout. They started this, actually, I think it started with like the Twilight series having a very, very popular soundtrack. It sold very well, and then Hunger Games amplified that. They would bring in very popular bands, and I think that Divergent is leading towards that, is also going in that trend, and I think that's good for merchandising, because this isn't a film where you're going to make action figures or whatnot, and you probably could, but it's something that music can keep you connected to it. On top of that, so I think it's a lot to do with money, and I think it's fun. For the score, I thought that, especially with the one I noticed most was their Dauntless soundtrack in the beginning, when they were switching between her kind of initiation you got the very fast pace, the loud, almost rock type music whenever they appeared on the screen, and it did just notify the audience that there was a change coming.
Give them a signature.
It did. It gave them that
Identity,
momentum around them
yeah.
until she had finally kind of acclimated into their scenario, and then that kind of lifted off, and we got more of the indie music in the background. Also, before I know we sign off, we should also talk about money.
Money.
How
much do you owe me again?
Money.
Money. Okay, so let me just pull
do you want me to give you some
Yes.
Sure.
things?
Yeah,
So box office, according to IMDb, budget for this was $85 million.
that's a lot of
Estimated. Quite a bit. Opening weekend, though, in the U.S., so for the weekend of March 21st, was $54,607,747. And it's grossed supposedly about $68 million. So it's obviously huge success. Number one at the box office opening weekend. It's doing very well. I think that that's pretty expected because it does do a cookie cutter mold and does stand alone, and at least the director went with a vision and stuck to it. And it's a fun action filled movie.
And it should be noted again, I'm mad at the critics. You know, we got a lot of flack almost kind of for doing this podcast, which is weird.
What? We got flack
from fans
because we were gonna do Divergent. They got mad at us.
It's so, you know, critics and things of that nature of like, you know, this movie sucks. Why, you know? And I was like, what? And then and I was like kind of hesitant to go see it. You know, like, oh, am I going to really enjoy this? Is it going to be a drag for me? But then I got into it, and I was like, they're kind of wrong. And then, you know, you could speak to maybe about the audience reception, but it seems to be overall good for the audience.
Critic reception, not so much, but audience, much more.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, like, this is where I just said I was going to step on my own, you know, my own words or whatnot. It's because, like, wow, it wasn't what I pictured. Because I mean, my imagination had created one world. The world that they brought me into, I did like. It was different, and it was different. But as a film, it was made well. I thought it was shot well. I thought that it was an action flick that had build up and had interesting moments and comedic twists and characters and whatnot and all that. I thought was done really well. I don't particularly see the critics' negative reactions as, like, I'm not as aligned with them. For me, it would be more of a fan place in me that's like, aw, I wish it was a little more like this, but it got in my mind. But I mean, I didn't create the movie, so you guys, and I thought that they did a nice job.
That's good. Marissa, any last thoughts?
Well, overall, as a movie, I thought it was very solid, very well done. The acting, for the most part, was pretty good. The storyline, I mean, obviously based off of the book, I thought it was interesting enough to keep the audience going and keep us entertained. Overall, it was a good movie, solid. The cinematography was great and all that, and overall, I did enjoy it.
Like, I'm definitely gonna watch this again. I'll give it that. Yeah. Like,
you have to when we do the second one. You might want to catch up.
I do feel like, even though, because when I was watching it, I was like, wow, this is a really long movie, but it was good pacing to go throughout.
John, are you part of the teen female audience?
Yeah,
that likes
I am the demographic that they're going for. I think for the genre movie it delivers. I can't speak to, obviously. I think for anybody who likes this genre, this is a good movie. If you're a fan of the book, if you go expecting the book, you may be a little disappointed here and there. But if you go just to ride and watch the movie, I think you'll enjoy yourself.
All right. Well, on that note, we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in yet again to another Anatomy of a Movie dissection. Dimitri Panos obviously didn't join us for this one, but he will be back. Right now, he's at CinemaCon doing movie-type things.
maybe he'll see Shailene.
Maybe.
Because she's there.
Maybe. We've got a lot of movies this year coming up. We've got so many. I just found out what Interstellar by Christopher Nolan. That took me by surprise. We got that coming out. We'll be doing Noah just up, right around the corner. Exodus is coming up. Speaking of Christian morals and values.
Also Noah.
We're gonna do
We'll do The Last Hobbit at the end.
Turtles.
We'll do the Ninja Turtles. We've got a lot to look forward to just this year alone. I was doing the calendar.
We're doing the Winter Soldier.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are. We got, I was doing the calendar, and there's a lot of movies. I'm like, oh, why can't we do this now? Why can't we do this now? Let's do it now. So we love watching movies. We hope you love watching movies and listening to us talk about the movies. And, as an added bonus, feel free to talk back with us via Twitter at Movie Anatomy, via iTunes, YouTube, our website, whatever it may be. Let us know your opinions. We love hearing them. Don't be shy. We're all divergent in our own ways. Anything else?
I'm good.
All right. Enjoy whatever day it is for you, and go to the movies right after. We'll see you next time.
Producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
It's not missing for me in terms of the movie. I can see how that would make it more interesting for you, and certainly would make it a darker piece, so to speak. But as I took the movie as it came to me, I can absolutely see how that would change things. But I just realized, okay, so they're not going that route. Mm-hmm. So, and because they didn't go their route to start with, for me it worked because they never really went there. They showed the stakes, but I agree with you. They weren't as high or as life-threatening as they could have been, certainly in the book. But for me, that kind of worked in terms of this movie because they never hinted at that. It never went that route, so it wasn't like it was out of context for the way the movie rolled out. But I can see how that would be a little bit disjointing if you'd read the book.
Well, I think that the director had a very good, consistent vision.
Yeah.
And I think that is what carries it and makes it a good film. Mm-hmm. It's just hard when that vision doesn't align, because I think that what people do when they try to adapt books is, they want to get the essence. That's the main thing. It's because you have to make allowances. You have to say, okay, they can't capture everything. It's not going to be identical. And you, as a fan, I go in expecting that. I know it's not going to be exactly the same, but the essence that I got out of this book, I guess, was disaligned from the vision the director had. Well, and so it was hard to put myself in grasping
because you already have a
main
concept.
themes.
Yeah, it's hard to.
It was hard to transfer that over when I left the book with a different notion.
And that's always going to be the way it is with books. But I can speak to that in terms of not reading the book, because one of the things, because I never said what I liked. I liked the movie. I think it played well. I think it's better than most people are giving it credit for. Is it missing some things? Yeah. And one of the things I thought was missing is the sense of raising the stakes, or the context, which was a little bit off me, because you set up this dystopia, but it really doesn't seem to be that bad. And then they're Dauntless. They're protecting these people for, 100 years? From what? You never get to see what any external problem is, or they're protecting them from what exactly?
Well, that's actually, I looked up, because that adds to the book's nature of, this world is kind of crumbling.
Yeah.
And the director, that was a conscious choice that he made, being that he wanted, we're talking about Neil Berger, he said that he wanted audience to understand why Tris or Beatrice would want to live here and why she would want to conform to this society. So he wanted to give an initial idea of something that was whole, that the audience then saw with Tris, as aligned with her vision of it crumbling and falling apart and becoming the dystopia. The problem is, we know it's a dystopia.
Yeah.
So there's a disalignment.
Yeah,
so we don't
you set up.
need,
Yeah, exactly.
I knew society was falling apart. I knew there were cracks in this foundation. So it didn't need to seem so happy at the beginning. But he made a conscious choice, and it was a decision that he wanted it to seem put together, and something that someone would want to be part of, and something that someone would want to find affection. Because
is that specifically because you read the book, though?
Yes.
You're talking about something that they didn't.
Very much because I read the book.
Okay.
And something that I found in the book that I did.
So
not
half
find
of us
worthy.
read the book, half of us didn't. The males of the team did not, because we don't read. The females of the team did.
Yes.
Oh, because we do read.
Yes.
We read. Good people.
Yes. Why you're erudite.
I'll
But
take it.
I mean, one of the reasons why I see so many critics kind of talking about it, because there's so many dystopian stories and things of that nature. We've got one coming later this year called The Giver, which I think we're looking forward
Everyone's
to.
so
but
excited about.
I don't know. It was what it was. It wasn't trying to be Blade Runner, you know, nor was it trying to be The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Nor was it trying to, if you want to talk about a TV show, it wasn't trying to be The Prisoner.
Hold up. Oh my gosh.
okay.
God.
Based on
This is why we separate the factions. Get out of here.
I mean, no, this is probably what it's going to be, I think, a big debate, particularly amongst like people who did read the books and people who watched the movie. And it's a very hard distinguishing to men because this movie got so much publicity in the public eye and it already had such a following. And for me, the book had an essence that was darker, that was very dystopian, and that had this raw edge to it where it's extremely violent packed. It can be seen as very dark. They talk about themes of like sexuality, all these other layers. And to me, they tried to mold this into a cookie cutter teen film, merging somewhere between like Twilight and The Hunger Games. And it was, to me, it was still
Let's talk about the source
lighthearted.
material. And Marissa, speak up in a moment. But for me, okay, I didn't read the full book, but I read, honestly, it's one of the easiest reads, John. You could read this in like 30 minutes. So I read it for 5 minutes and got to like page 40. Now, this isn't Philip K. Dick writing. Let's be honest. No, honestly, because guess what? It's on par with the level of Harry Potter. So to hear that it's dark, it's not that dark for me.
I mean, this book, I feel like there were some dark elements, but I liked that the movie, their creative choices, they went with the lighter route because you want to keep the kids and the young adult audience engrossed with it as well. And then, yes, I did read the book.
But this is also where I'm going to argue. It's because like there is that idea that I guess teenagers don't want to see anything too gritty, but I just feel like that's not true. I feel like we've seen Hunger Games, we've seen all these things that are in a way lighter, but then people are watching, or like take the Underworld series. Like that is a very
dark.
Very dark and also very teen watched. Like, or adolescents or young adults, and they can handle it. Not to mention with shows like Game of Thrones and whatnot, where you're getting multiple storylines and like things don't need to be. The consciousness is that if you're in a dystopian society, why would you want to fit in?
Well, yeah,
and that he wanted to create a whole picture that someone would want to fit.
You don't even need that, to be honest with you, because I agree. That's a little bit. Again, I don't think that coincides very well because you don't need that. Everybody knows at the age 16, whatever it is, there's always this sense of trying to fit in. Where do I fit in? What am I going to be? All that kind of stuff is already there. It doesn't matter if you're in a dystopian society or utopian society. You're always going to have that thing happening.
It's cliques at high school.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you don't need...
When you grow out of them, you're like, oh, it didn't matter which one I was. When you're in high school, you want to be
because you're finding
one.
yourself. You're establishing your identity. So the fact that I disagree with that. I don't know why that decision was made because you didn't need it to set up the whole movie. And maybe I'm sure that obviously hurt some people who had read the book and then saw the movie because I was going, it's dystopian, except this place is nice, and but there doesn't seem to be any real threat. So why do we really need a Dauntless? Because it's not like they're going to take out each other.
But the factionless were the people.
Yeah, but again, the factionless, they're rummaging around, but they don't really seem to be causing any trouble.
Yeah, I think the point of the factions in this movie, how they portrayed it, was that just to set up the 5 different personalities. And that added to Divergence and Triss's character because she had multiple personalities. And I was like, if you think about it...
Well, she just had not multiple, she just had faceted personalities.
She had 3 different that she could have been a part of. And I mean,
like
if you apply it to real world, that's everyone.
Yeah.
And so we're all technically divergent.
Yeah.
And the point of the factions were just to like individualize personalities.
Well, yeah, and it's also to control.
I wanted to I want to talk about the script and all the things in a moment, but in the movie, the big decision was, okay, what is she going to choose?
Yeah.
And if there's one slight flaw for me, again, I enjoyed it way more so than other people, so I'm going to stick up to it. But the one problem I had was I didn't understand why Dauntless. If given a choice, why Dauntless? And it's a very philosophical question, but there was never an explanation of why she chose that over, hey, had she like literally cut her hand and spun and wherever blood lands, that's my place.
The only thing I took from it was that I sensed that she had this this isn't the right words, but this inner warrior, this sense of she was confined in abnegation, and there was something yearning to be free. And I think what she saw in Dauntless is that the freedom with which they just expressed them, and by that I mean there was so physical,
they were flocking.
Physicality, and that sense of wanting to just be relentless with your freedom. And that spoke to her age. That spoke to her in this world. I can't even see myself. And everything's very about something else. And for me, it was that inner.
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Anatomy of a Movie dissection. Today's dissection is Divergent.
Woohoo!
Representing
Are you gonna,
dauntlessness
Dauntless.
is Phil Svitek.
Just dauntless.
Representing candor,
Ooh.
John Comerford.
Oh, okay.
Representing erudite,
I'll take
Very
it.
nice.
Sarah Stratton. Abnegation, Marissa Serafini in the booth.
Thank you.
That's
Phil.
why she's in the booth.
And Amity, Dimitri Panos, who is
No,
in
it is.
Vegas.
He's out in the field growing and reaping.
Yeah. Here's one of my main missions for this episode is to kind of. Critics have been hating on this movie, and there's been a few comments on our channel where people still comment about us as we're critics, and we're not.
Yes.
And you know what? To all the actual critics, I am surprised at you guys why you hate on this movie, because you know what? I enjoyed it. There, I say it.
Okay.
Boom.
That
I rest my
That
case.
makes
As
me
we're
a
done.
little nervous to talk because I became a fan of this book and was very excited to see this movie. And
This isn't going to end well.
it's very hard because I feel like I'm going to be like stepping on myself this show because there's a lot of things about Divergent, the film, that I really liked. How it was made, how it was filmed, acting wise. I have a lot of positive to say. But after I walked out of the movie, I had this seed of thought get planted that I think it should have been a TV show, like a 1-hour drama. And ever since that idea got planted in my mind, it's kind of just like grown and festered. And so a lot of what I see and a lot of, I guess, my criticisms of the movie stem from the fact that I think they could have hit the nail on the head harder, taking a little bit a different route. That's not to say it was a bad movie and I didn't enjoy it. I did. I thought it was very fun, high energy, some wonderful things that we're going to touch on and talk about here today. But there was just this one note that missed the mark that I think could have been captured under a different setting in a different
I get what you're
simplified down. Things don't need to always be like happy and light. I think that it would have been such a different perspective on the teen movie to see something a little more aggressive and a little more.
Okay, so inevitably we're going to talk about the difference between the book and the movie. So give me right now your general. Let's go into specifics about the source material versus the movie that's not as dark about the movie.
For instance, right off the back, once she gets or chooses to be in Dauntless, they're jumping on the train and you get a death of an actual Dauntless and like initiate right off the bat of jumping to that building.
Because they missed the train or they just missed the building?
Either
way,
they miss the building, fall on the ground,
Got it.
and their sister is crying on top of the roof, mourning the loss. And it shows that it's a dangerous game whether or not you're a transfer or whether you were raised there.
And yours is why not keep that in? Because obviously that raises the stakes. It lets us know the context, and it puts us in a different feeling than just jumping on a roof and rolling on the gravel.
And it's very, in the book, it's very cutthroat. It's put out there that this is very high stakes. I mean, in the movie, they increased the number of people
to 30
attempting
whatever,
to like what the original number is 35.
30, like
and when you're first seeing this, you're seeing the rankings and it's more or less like 10 of each. And so you're really competing against just this small group of people.
So in the book, there's only 10 people or something.
Well, I believe there's around like 10 transfers and around 10 like
so all those who don't
born.
make it end up factionless. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
And it was just, to me, like in the book, it was such a battle, and you got to see all these dirty fights and deaths, and it was kind of pushed aside, and there was tons of people who were doing it, and there wasn't too much danger. Like there was a little bit of danger that you might get punched in the face, but it wasn't put out as forth as you were going to die. And that is a big drastic difference in my mind.
Yeah, and I agree, because in the book there were a lot of more individual deaths that weren't really talked upon, or a lot of individual violence that weren't talked about, because also yes, Sarah, as you mentioned, they cut out the first guy, the first person who died, and then there was also another moment where one of them got stabbed in the eye, because just the violence between them, and that wasn't even shown. But we did see the Al, the character who committed suicide. But so there were more individual deaths throughout.
But even that,
the training that they didn't show. So by the time and I don't mean to jump ahead, but by the time they got to the scenes where they're like just shooting at each other, it didn't seem that, I guess we just desensitized to that, because we didn't really touch upon the individual deaths that could have had a bigger impact.
I think it's interesting that the ladies on the panel here want more deaths and violence. I'm kidding. What it seems to me is, obviously, if you've read the book, that's missing from the movie. I didn't read the book, so